Hey, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about a topic that can be a little bit stressful, a little bit angering, and I know that it is very prevalent in a lot of homes of parents who are raising teenagers, mine included. So, I'm going to attempt to address this topic with a little bit of humor, to lighten the mood because I do think that sometimes we do we do take ourselves a little bit too seriously. So, um, has your teenager ever sighed at you so hard that you could feel it like spiritually? Like you asked them to put their shoes away or something crazy. And the sigh that they produced is like every frustration they've ever felt since like birth. Okay. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Noel Gray. I am a biblical behavior coach and apparently also a specialist in teen size. So today we're going into one of the most common and most exhausting parenting challenges out there. So, teenager backtalk and disrespect. And I promise you, by the end of this episode, you're going to see this behavior completely differently. Not as a failure, not as a disaster, but rather like as an invitation. So hang on there. We're going to get into it and I'm going to make you feel completely better about yourself. All right. So, quick housekeeping. If anything from today's episode helps you, I would love for you to DM me the word help on any of the platforms. Again, you'll find that at Parenting by the Book. Note the name change. I'm pretty excited about it. It came to me one day, and I wasn't expecting it, but it rolled off the tongue. Parenting by the Book. And I can send you my guide, the Back Talk Blueprint. And it's a 3-step conversation model that you can use with your teenager probably this week, maybe today, maybe within the next hour. All right. So let's talk about the first thing I want to talk about is why backtalk surprises parents. Okay. So I had a mom in my office last year. A lovely woman. She was patient, faithful, and had done pretty much everything right. And she looked at me and said, "It's like I don't know this kid anymore." She looks at me like I'm her enemy. And the thing was that like she was blindsided by the back talk, not because it's rare, but because there is a gap between who your child was at 8 and who they are at 14. And a big gap. That gap is it's developmentally normal. It really is, but normal does not mean that it's accepted. You still address that. And, culture, don't get me started on culture. Culture tells parents that's just what teenagers do. And that's one of the most dangerous half truths in parenting. And just it takes something that can be trained and turns it into something that must be endured. And so for me, culture and proverbs are completely disagreeing there. So Proverbs 22:6 tells us that you are to train up a child in the way that they should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Paul didn't put an asterisk on that verse and say, well, except teenagers on a Wednesday when they didn't get enough sleep. He didn't put that in there. Just because it's developmentally normal doesn't mean that we just accept it. Okay. Now, I want to talk about, just where that surprise comes from. That surprise comes from, when we have our babies, we always see them as our little babies. They will always be our little baby until the day that we die. And those reels that they show, like, what he thinks I'm looking at or what he thinks I see or what she thinks I see, on graduation day. And it's like, them and their cap and gown with their diploma and, all their friends around them. And then it's like it splits screens or it does like a stitch in and it's like what I actually see. And then it's really, a little baby face at their kindergarten graduation with a cap and gown and, the little chubby cheeks and the still needing mommy and all those things. It's kind of like that. We keep that kindergarten graduation image in our minds all the time, and we never really get to our brains never really accept the fact that they've grown. They are not the same person. And here's the other thing, or the other reason why it surprises us. When they're young, we basically influence everything that they're doing. We influence the way they say things. We influence the friends they pick. And sometimes we even decide if they can or cannot be friends with those people. We basically, they are in need of our input on pretty much every topic. And so when they get to that teenage stage, what they're doing is they're starting to break away from us and they're starting to develop their own personality. And for a mom, that can be really scary because what if they have the wrong influences come into their lives? What if it takes them completely off the right path and they go down a dark path for a while? And so as a parent, we want to stop that from happening, but the reality is we can't always. We have to train them in the way that they should go and eventually just trust that what scripture says is true. They will come back to it. Um, so like the, what is back talk? Like, what is back talk actually communicating? So for me, I like to look at back talk as like, it's backtalk is almost never about the content of what was asked. So if you are asking them to clean their room, that does not actually produce a 45-second philosophical argument unless something else is going on. What your teen is communicating to you, or, in translation, essentially, is I don't feel heard, or it could be I'm overwhelmed and I don't have the vocabulary to say that. We think that because our kids are older and they've gone through however many English courses now that they have this, vast vocabulary. But what we fail to understand is that feelings and emotions and these experiences that they have, when it's the first time they're having that experience, they don't have a word to apply to it. So we actually have to help them. The other thing that they could be communicating that's being lost in translation is I'm testing the structure because I need to know that it's solid. Kids need structure. Kids want boundaries. Kids thrive in environments where there are boundaries. And so they sometimes just need to know that that's still there and that it's still solid and that they're still safe, essentially, is what they're doing. Or they could be, communicating that they're frustrated about something entirely different. And that's just how it came out. I know that it probably shocks you, but a lot of teenagers don't even know that they're about to have a backtalk moment. It just happens. It just bubbles up and it's gone. So the other thing, that's important to note about backtalk is it's actually a power bid. They're working and they're fighting for power. And adolescence is developmentally anyways, it is a bid for autonomy. And that's what I was kind of explaining, how like they're breaking away from you and they're becoming their own person. And sometimes the first version of themselves apart from you that they choose to become isn't your favorite. And you're not going to like it. And it's going to take a few versions of themselves to get to wherever they're going. But your teen is figuring out where they end and you begin. And I used to say that to my daughter all the time. Like, at some point, you need to realize, like, this is where I end and you begin. And I would use that phrase when I was talking mostly about responsibility. Like, This is what I'm responsible for in raising you, and this is what you're responsible for in your own life and making your own life choices. And sometimes like that boundary setting or understanding where I end and they begin, that process gets kind of loud. And that doesn't mean that you move the boundary. It means that you hold the boundary within the relationship. And what that means is that you hold it with love. The way you do that is, Proverbs 15:1, where it says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. And that is hard for us to do because I like to say that kids are just tiny adults and adults are just big kids because we still have the same struggles. We still have the same needs, desires, wants. We still get frustrated. We still have bad days. It's just the adults, hopefully, have learned how to manage those things a little bit better. And they've had the experiences where they can apply the the term or the vocabulary to whatever that experience is so they can deal with it a little bit better, a little bit quieter, a little bit calmer, and with a little bit more of a specific process. And so, all of that being said, like the power bit is going to happen, but you have to still establish the fact that there is a boundary, hold the boundary, and don't let that boundary become the thing you're fighting over. That's where, you come into play and you guide and you coach through those moments. So, um, so my personal favorite that happens when I talk to my kids, when I go to, ask them, what's wrong and my youngest daughter does this the most. I'll say, what's bothering you, is something wrong or what happened? And it's just like, and it's my favorite, you know, I'm fine. And she doesn't mean that she's fine. She doesn't want to talk or she's not wanting to, share at that moment. And sometimes that in and of itself can be a power bid. That I'm fine and I don't have to tell you, and I'm not going to tell you because this belongs to me. That can sometimes be a power bid. Sometimes it's a I'm scared. Sometimes it's a I'm embarrassed. But either way, that fine is not actually fine. And so, I anchor, this entire thing. I anchor it in Proverbs 18:3, where it says to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. Before you address their behavior, because remember, behavior is just a manifestation of something in the heart. It could be an emotion. It could be, an idol. It could be an attribute or a character trait that is manifesting. It could be pride. It could be all sorts of things, but it could be fear. It could be sadness. It could be all those things. So before you address the behavior, do you understand what's underneath it? And so I encourage you to go through this verse, Proverbs 18:13, to answer before listening. That is folly and shame. I encourage you to go through this verse and just kind of sit with it a little bit and kind of, reflect on what that means to you. Okay. All right. So the Bible says in Ephesians 6 um, that, and as parents, we like to cherry pick. And I'm guilty of that sometimes too. But one of the things that's bad about teaching your kids scripture is that they'll quote it against you and you can't argue them. But it's also a good thing because you know that they know scripture, but they do throw it in my face sometimes. I'm not mad about it. Maybe a little bit hurt about it because they were right or whatever, but um, you can't cherry pick scripture. So in Ephesians 6, there is a full picture of how parents and children interact. And most parents like to quote Ephesians 6:1. I love to quote Ephesians 6:1, where it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for it is right." And they should. Absolutely, they should. But Ephesians 6:4 is right there too. 3 verses later, it says, "Fathers." and it's referring to fathers and mothers because remember in biblical times women were lesser than, so they, oftentimes when they referred to fathers it was, you know, mothers and fathers. When they referred to men it was really referring to everybody, but they didn't acknowledge women. So it says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Another version says, do not provoke your children to anger. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So here in Ephesians 6, we see that both verses are in play simultaneously, actually in the same chapter. And so you can't just cherry pick and say, well, this time it's this or this time it's that. It's in play every time. And you cannot hold your kids accountable to the command in verse 1 if you are ignoring your assignment in verse 4. So what let's look at what exasperating looks like in practice. So exasperating would look like, enforcing without explanation. Um, Kids need to understand the why behind the what. You can't just say, do this and not explain where you're coming from. I am guilty of saying, because I said so, or because I'm the mom. I don't think that I say that as often as others, but I do say it. I think that we're all guilty of saying that. And then the other thing, you can't punish without training. You can't just send a kid to their room or take away a phone or something like that without walking them through and coaching them through what they did to earn that punishment. You have to help them get better from that moment. The punishment, the purpose of the punishment or the discipline is to disciple means to teach. So it's to teach them, to coach them, to guide them, to advise them. So demanding respect without modeling, respect, or demanding respect while modeling contempt. That's even worse. You're demanding respect. Meanwhile, you're giving them the silent treatment, or you're, you know, just being rude to be rude, and you're, just walking away from them or saying, not now, not now, putting them off and putting them off, putting them off. I'm guilty of that. Um, that is one of the things that is going to exasperate your child. The other thing too, and I think that, you know, we maybe get busy sometimes, or we forget this part, or we just assume that it's gonna be there, is when we address the behavior without addressing the relationship. A lot of times after we address the behavior, things might get heated, or it might require a consequence, or it might lead to having some sort of disconnect. If you don't come back to address that relationship and reconnect, that divide stays there. So then when the next time they do something comes up, you have to address them. You have to give them a consequence, or what have you. There's going to be more disconnect. And if you don't address the relationship or reconnect after that, that divide gets bigger. And then it happens again, and it gets bigger and bigger. So every single time that you have a situation, you have to, if there's a little bit of disconnect, or even if it was an argument, or some ugly things were said, or you handled it poorly, or you lost your temper, whatever it is, you have to bring back and reconnect in that relationship. I'll give you an example. The other day, my daughter came downstairs. I forget what she was even asking. I just knew that I was working. I was in the zone, and I was rude to her. I said hurtful things to her. I rushed her away. And about 4 or 5 minutes later, I had to call her back down, even though I had told her a million times that she needed to not interrupt me while I was working, and treat, just because I work from home, and that's the stairs that leads up to their bedroom, and this leads into our living room, and my dining room's over there. Like, my office is just open. Even though I'm here and my office is open, doesn't mean that I'm available. And I've said that, and I've preached that, and I've done all that I can to, keep my work consistent and be able to do both, be a mom and work from home. But, just because I said that doesn't mean that when she doesn't go, or when she goes against that, that I have the right to just completely be rude and go off on her. So I called her down a few minutes later and I apologized because that was my fault. So I had to make sure that we reconnected. Um, all that to say, the Bible does say, do not provoke your children to anger. Do not exasperate them. Um, don't make them so frustrated or so tired of hearing from you that they explode or they're provoked to anger. All right. Colossians 3, verse 20. It says, we're just going to dig a little bit deeper here. It says, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. The obedience of your child is actually an act of worship. That is what you should be telling them, not obey me because I'm your mother. You are obeying your parents as an act of worship to the Lord, who is much greater than me or you or anybody else, right? And so you need to train that. And the training you provide them is part of their spiritual formation. So again, it goes back to giving them the why behind the what. Why do I need to obey you? Because it's an act of worship to the Lord. And that kind of brings you guys down kind of on the same wavelength, not the same level, but it keeps there from being animosity just by, you being authoritative, like you have to obey me. It makes it more of a, hey, we're working together here for the Lord. I'm obeying the Lord because out of worship for the Lord, and you're obeying me out of worship for the Lord. And so it kind of brings you out or brings you on the same wavelength. But that training that you provide is part of their spiritual formation. And so this isn't just about, a clean room or making their bed or a civil tone. When you are addressing back talk, you are discipling. This is discipleship. So again, the verses for you are Ephesians 6:1, Ephesians 6:4, Colossians 3:20, Proverbs 15:1, and Proverbs 29:15. A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom. All right. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is have you ever watched the movie The Parent Trap? This is the parenting trap. And this is what makes it worse. Okay. So the first trap is reacting instead of responding. I am so guilty of this, especially as of late. I was better at this earlier on, especially with my first set of teenagers, but that was a whole different dynamic. So it's a little bit different, but the moment that you match their energy, meaning you get loud because they got loud, or you're yelling because they were yelling, or you're being disrespectful because they were disrespectful, you lose the authority advantage. Whoever is the calmest actually holds the power in that conversation. And actually, as of late, my younger daughter, because I've got a lot going on, I've got some stresses, and my fuse is a little bit shorter. Every mother goes through that, but right now my fuse is a little bit shorter. I will tell you, my daughter is winning out on me in the calmer response area, probably 50 to 60% of the time. She is reminding me to be calm, and so she is actually guiding that conversation. I'm proud of her, but also I'm a little bit annoyed because I'm like, ugh, I'm supposed to be the grown up, right? So, that response versus reacting matters. And if you respond calmly, you keep the authoritative advantage or the authority advantage because you're not trying to be authoritative. All right. The second trap that parents fall into is you go immediately to correcting. And I was corrected on this when, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a period of time where again, I'm talking about my youngest daughter a lot, but that's the most recent and it's what comes to my head. And what's funny is she's sitting in the other room right now and she can hear everything I'm saying. So she'll probably say something later. Um, but um, when you go directly to correcting, I was guilty of this. You correct before you connect. When she was going through this time in her, I guess, adolescence where she was having a hard time expressing her feelings, or she would start to recognize something maybe in a friend group or an issue that she was having and things like that. She would start talking about something that somebody did to her. I would immediately ask her questions. And it wasn't because I thought she was wrong. It was because I wanted to make sure that she she was right. And I wanted to make sure that she was practicing this self-reflection as well. As these things unfolded in her world, you can only control one person, and that's you. You can't control what happens outside of you. And so that was the lesson that I was trying to enforce was, okay, they did that thing. What can you do about it? So I would immediately go to reflecting, are you sure you didn't do this? Or was there a chance that you came across this way? Or can you think back on anything that you said that maybe would have made them feel this, that, or the other? And so I immediately went to correcting or coaching before I connected. And going straight there, basically, it just exasperates the issue. It brings them to anger. It frustrates them because here they are. They came to you. They want to say something to you, whether they said it in the right tone or not. If they came at you hollering and you go straight to that tone is unacceptable without first acknowledging that, there might be something driving that tone, you're going to cause that issue to become greater. And now instead of the problem being the child having an issue with a situation, now the child has an issue with you and you have an issue with the child. So now it's become personal versus just being a problem. So Proverbs 18:13 says, listen first. Okay, so we immediately jump to correcting. We've got to listen first. All right, trap number 3. And I see this a lot in exhausted mothers, especially single mothers. And I can remember when I was a single mother, this started to happen to me. And I really struggled with consistency. And inconsistency is the most effective way to escalate back talk. Because if you respond to it differently every time, the teens are going to pick up on that and they're smart. And so they learn really quickly what's going to work with you. If whatever sometimes produces a lecture and sometimes produces nothing, they'll keep trying it. So if you want that behavior to stop, then you're going to have to be consistent with your response. If whatever is a problem with you, then it has to consistently produce a consequence or discipline or some sort of maybe a lecture. Those aren't always effective, but if that's what it is, then that's what it is all the time. It can't just be because I was in a mood or because I didn't feel like engaging today because I'm tired or anything like that. You have to be consistent. Teens will test you every day of the week. They will test you. All right, trap number 4. Making the conversation about you. And again, I'm only saying these things because I've done all of these things. It is very easy for a mother to say, I work so hard, or we know what goes on in our minds, and we know all the things that we stress about for our family and our kids and our this and our that, and we know how mentally taxing and emotionally taxing this parenting thing is. And so, when we start to make the conversation about us and we're like, I work so hard for this family and this is the respect I get, or this is how I you repay me. That feeling is understandable. That is human. But when you respond like that, it completely derails the training. It changes that conversation into a guilt trip. And so now, instead of having a coaching conversation, you're sending them on a guilt trip, and guilt trips do not produce lasting behavioral change. It will produce a behavior modification, but it will never produce a permanent behavioral change. And we're going after heart change. We're going after permanent change. We don't want to have this same conversation over and over and over again. And so when we don't want to have this conversation over and over and over again, we have to change the way we address it. And so we cannot flip that conversation and make it about me. So I have been guilty of every single one of these. I want that on record. As a biblical behavior coach, also formerly a tired parent who said, "Do you know how much I sacrificed for you?" Into the void, because nobody was listening. We grow and we learn. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the solution. I've given you all the problems. Let me talk to you about the solution. So, the back talk blueprint, it's 3 steps. They actually work and it is absolute gold. Step 1, pause. Okay. Before you respond, take a 3-second pause. 1, 2, 3. That's it. And that's not because you're weak. It's because you are choosing to be smarter. In that moment, you're letting your wisdom take over. Okay? You know that Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath." Your pause in that moment is actually a leadership decision. It's maturity, it's wisdom. You're taking the lead. And remember, whoever stays calm is in the lead. All right. Step 2, you have to address the tone before the topic. Don't have the argument about the room. Don't go into I wanted you to make your bed or I wanted you to clean your room. Have a very brief, don't go on and lecture, very brief, clear exchange about the tone first. Hey, I hear you're frustrated. That tone doesn't work in this house. Take a minute. You're basically coaching them. Oh, you're basically coaching them through what you just did. Okay. I need you to take a moment, take a minute, and when you're ready to talk to me respectfully, I'm here. Now, you have to be careful how you deliver that line. You can't say, "Hey, I hear you're frustrated, but that tone doesn't work in this house." You can't do that. It's, "Hey, I hear you're frustrated, but we can't have that tone in this house. Why don't you go take a minute? And when you're ready to speak, and we can do so respectfully, then we'll have the conversation." It can't be, "And when you're ready to speak to me respectfully, then we can talk." You can't do that. And so these are the words I'm giving you, but the tone you use actually matters. If you're going to, address their tone, you have to use the appropriate tone as well. And so you have to, you have to show them or model to them just as much as as you talk to them or teach them or train them. So you take a minute when you're ready to talk to me respectfully. I'm here. And then you stop. You don't lecture, you don't go on and on and on, and you give one clear statement, then silence. It's done. Now sometimes that requires you to go into other rooms and take multiple minutes. Sometimes it's you're just breathing here in the moment. You take a literal minute. You're like, "Okay, I'm ready." And then you carry on. But whatever is needed in that moment, you need to make sure that you provide space for. Okay. Step 3, enforce your expectations consistently. Every time, not every other time, every single time. Not when you have the energy for it, every time. And I know that we don't always have the energy for it. And with the same calm firmness, you can have calm and firm in the same happening simultaneously. Remember, teenagers are testing the structure. It's a power bid. You need to show them that it is solid. A consequence that is clear, a consequence that is connected and consistent teaches what you expect and teaches them in ways that lectures never will. You can talk at somebody all that you want, but getting it to sink in only comes through consistency, firmness, calmness, connection. That's what you need, okay? All right. So, in summary, all right, backtalk is translated frustration about something. It can also be a power bid, but it is also developmentally driven. It is normal, but it is not biblically acceptable. Proverbs, Ephesians, Colossians, they all give us a full picture. Both the parent and the child have assignments here. We are given commands here. And the Backtalk Blueprint gives you 3 practical steps. You can start applying that this week, okay? So here's what I want you to carry out of this episode. You were chosen for this child. Not accidentally, not by default, chosen. And Proverbs 22:6 is a promise from God, not a deadline. Okay? You are farming. The harvest is coming. Listen, if this episode helped you, here's what I want you to do. I want you to comment or DM me or email me at noel@noelgray.com, and I will send you a free PDF of the Back Talk Blueprint so that you can have it, keep it, refer to it, use it, put it as a reminder in your office or in your bedroom or wherever you need to throughout the house. I will send that to you, but you got to either comment below, send me a DM, or shoot me an email, Noel, Noel, at noelgray.com, noelgray.com. That's all I have for you today. I hope that this helped you. I hope that this shed some light on, what's going on in your home with teenagers. Again, remember that you were chosen for this child. And that's all I have for you today. Until next time, stay prayed up.